Welcome, I'm Ollie Rodriguez Dom and I hope you're having a fantastic day, and in this video we are doing another tier list where we are going to be ranking every single Logic album. Now before I go on, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well, we're trying to grow the channel, and also feel free to let me know your opinions on Logic's discography down below. How would you rank them and how would you rank this tier list? Now let's start this off by doing the first album of Logic's, and that is Under Pressure. And for me, Under Pressure is definitely a classic, and I would definitely argue for it to be in the S tier, but for me I'm going to say it's an A tier. Now the reason for that's just because personally for me, it's always an album that I can go back to and listen to, and I would definitely say it's in like Logic's top 3. Like with every artist, I feel like they have to have like top 3 albums, and I would definitely argue that Under Pressure isn't just a classic album of Logic's. I would say it's like a classic album in hip-hop, especially through the 2010s. I think it's great at capturing like a new up-and-coming rapper and their sort of drive and hunger to sort of get into the rap game, whilst also being able to carry this message of looking after their mental health as well. So I feel like there was a really good blend in there. Some great songs in there. Obviously you got No ID on there. Soul Food's probably one of the best songs on there. And for that, it's definitely a solid album. And then after Under Pressure, Logic decided to go ahead and drop what I would consider an S tier of an album, and that is The Incredible True Story. And the storytelling on that album I really liked. I think one of the things that I really enjoy about it is like there are skits on the album, but they don't outstay their welcome at all. I think like I'll get to that in a minute, but like some albums Logic has done, some skits tend to kind of outstay their welcome, whereas I feel like The Incredible True Story perfectly fits the skits in. And then you have incredible songs like City of Stars, Fade Away, Lord Willing, Paradise, Run It. Like there's so many good songs on there, and I would say this makes for like a definite S tier worthy of like Logic's albums. It's one that I always love to go back to and listen to, and I think part of it is like the soundscape of the album as well. Like all the songs could like create that futuristic sound without like kind of overdoing it either. And for this album, just overall, I think the storytelling of it and that soundscape element kind of mixed together for me to make a really truly worthy S tier worthy album. So after Logic dropped this S tier of an album, he then went ahead and dropped a summer mixtape, and this one was a banger. I'm not going to go ahead and say it was like on par with Under Pressure, which is why I'm going to place it into the B tier. And I think it's a great summer mixtape to just listen to and not really, I think this is the thing with the Tarantino stuff, it's not something you have to take as seriously. Logic has some low-key bangers on this, from Super Mario World to Flexecution, Slave, and of course 44 bars. You cannot go harder than that. And now we move on to where there's a little bit of a that kind of happens here, because we get Everybody, and I'm not going to put this in trash. I'm actually going to put it in C tier, because for me, I actually get personally some listening pleasure out of it, and I think for the song 1-800, I think it deserves a bit of praise for that. And also there's a lot more creativity here, but there's like a lot of non-rap elements within this album, which I think kind of makes a bit of a disconnect from maybe the fan base he was growing to that point. And like regardless of what people think, there are some great songs within it, and like it actually makes me want to like push it up a tier to B. But I think the thing is, like, there are a couple of songs on here which I could just take out and just listen to and enjoy. Like Everybody, Killing Spree, Take It Back, 1-800, regardless, even though people might say it's overplayed or whatever. Like, and even for me, one song that really helps me out, like, during a time where I, like, was just struggling, Anxiety was actually a really good song, and it's kind of like, it just was a song that I could relate to quite a bit, and I felt quite thankful that Logic put that song out there, and I was actually really able to enjoy it. So songs like those I really enjoyed. But I think one of the things that really hinders this album from being an album I can go back and like listen to is like the skits just take up way too much space, and this is what I was saying earlier, they overstay their welcome and just don't really fit with the flow that the album's trying to go for, in my opinion. I think my point with this album is there are some great like hidden gems in this album, but they're kind of overshadowed by long boring skits sometimes. But overall I think it's definitely like worth you going back and listening to the album, because you're definitely going to be missing out on stuff if you just kind of hate it completely. And then after that we go back to the Bobby Tarantino trilogy, and that is the second in the trilogy, Bobby Tarantino 2. And for me, I'm ranking in A tier. I actually prefer this a lot more than Bobby Tarantino 1. I don't know what it is, I just think there's a bit more, it goes a lot harder on the vibe that the Bobby Tarantino series set up. And whilst like Bobby Tarantino 1 has low-key bangers, this one just has bangers. And a couple of those songs for me include Overnight, Contra, State of Emergency, What's Up, Every Day, and 44 More. Like that's basically nearly the entire track list there, and I just get a lot more replay value out of it than Bobby Tarantino 1. I think Bobby Tarantino 1 was great in setting up the foundation of what Bobby Tarantino is, whilst Bobby Tarantino 2 kind of took what Bobby Tarantino 1 did and just elevated it to another level. So for that reason, it's in the 8s here, baby. So this is where things get a little interesting, because then we get Young Sinatra 4, and for me actually, I'm gonna put this in the B tier. I think Young Sinatra 4 is a really like chilled out sort of album, and it's kind of got like a low-key thing about it, and I feel like for whatever reason it is, it kind of somehow keeps the underground feel that the original Young Sinatra albums had, or mixtapes had. And to me, I feel like when I think of Logic's albums, it's somehow the one that's kind of always forgotten or I remember last. And that's not because it's bad. But I think what this album kind of is kind of like, it takes that kind of underground rap thing that the original Young Sinatras were doing, but adds a kind of pop element within it. So it's definitely kind of a sleeper album, and it's one that I definitely would say is like kind of another sort of hidden gem. I think the best way to describe it is that Everybody is the album where there are hidden gems on the album, whereas YS4 is an album that is a hidden gem itself. So now we have Supermarket, and I really do respect what Logic was doing here, and I just think it's just not an album for me, and it's one that's going in trash. I just think there's elements on it that aren't meant for me, but even in that sense, like, I can go and listen to any genre of music and enjoy it, but I just feel like it was Logic being experimental, and I feel like he had to do that album to sort of be able to improve those other sides of him that he wanted to explore in terms of music. I do like the concept of the fact that it's kind of like he's written a book and decided to make basically a soundtrack for it. I really do like that as a concept, but musically I just feel like it's a bit flat in my opinion. Which then takes us on to Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. And for me, this one's going to go top of C, because genuinely, I do actually get a lot of listening pleasure out of it. I remember when the album first came out, I feel like it was kind of, YS4 was sort of like, it dropped and then I got into Logic, whereas this one was kind of like my first real like Logic album that I would kind of like listen to on the day, got into. I even made videos on it actually. I think I made a reaction to the Eminem song he did on there. I think I also probably did a review as well. I can't remember this. This is like early era videos that I did. But this again for me is an overhated album, and I'm even considering putting it into B tier. And you know what, screw it, I'm gonna put it into B tier because I get a lot more enjoyment out of it than YS4. Like, I genuinely feel like with this album, it's an either you love it or you hate it. I think probably what people had an issue with is Logic built up a concept that wasn't actually there, and I think when he put out a tweet saying, I think it was like, this album was supposed to be Bobby Tarantino meets Under Pressure, which I don't think happened at all. I think this, if he had just called this Bobby Tarantino 3, I think it would have got received a bit more better. Like, people probably would have said it's not as good as the other two, but I think conceptually it fits a lot more with those themes. Like, this is an album that I will go, like, in the summer, in the mornings in summer, I would listen to this album. Like, I don't know what it is, that's just the vibe that this album suits very well. Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, the actual song, is a top 5 Logic song as well, and I think that song is where you get Bobby Tarantino meets Under Pressure, but unfortunately that's not really something that's met throughout every single song on here. It's weird, it kind of like, because he like started with an amazing song, ended with an amazing song, and just had all this sort of feeling like in between, and it just kind of like, this album could have been great, but I think there's stuff on it that should have just stayed out of it. And I think if he had called it anything else like Bobby Tarantino 3, I think there would have been less pressure on this album, and might have had people going back to it a bit more, or not taking it as seriously, being able to have a bit more fun with it, which is what Logic himself is saying. But then from Logic making, in regards to his fan base's opinion of it being like one of his worst albums, he then somehow just made the biggest comeback in rap ever and dropped No Pressure, which is top of S tier for me. This is one of my like favorite albums of all time. I love it to the point I've got it tatted on my arm. But No Pressure is just Logic's masterpiece in my opinion. I love every song on it. I would argue that there are no skips. I think there's only one song in it which I think isn't a skip. I just think it's placed in the wrong place in the track list order, which is GP4. I think that should have been a bit further down in the album, like maybe after Dark Place. But besides that, I don't see any issues with this album. I think also the message behind it, like obviously Logic was sort of saying this was going to be his retirement album, and I think to an extent, regardless of what's happened afterwards, I still think it is. Like, to me, I consider this the album where Logic kind of retired from mainstream music slash the kind of industry that music has become, in the sense of like quite scummy behavior and whatnot. But at a time in my life where I kind of needed some music to kind of pick me up and help me through uni, this was the album that did it. And I think that probably, even though it doesn't feel that long ago, it is 3 years ago, and it's probably a side of nostalgia that helps me kind of like remember this album maybe better than I'm remembering. But I think there's just amazing songs in this. It's an unskippable track list, I'm just saying it. It's my favorite Logic album to date, and I think also on top of that, I think it helps solidify Logic back in the spot he should have been perceived in, because I think Logic should be amongst the J. Cole's, the Kendricks, Drake's even. Like, he should be in that kind of level of regarded of how good he is as a rapper. But I think part of his issue was he was producing too much music at once, or even losing some of the passion he was having for it. And I think the feedback he was getting from fans like was part of the reason he decided he wanted to retire. But I think this album really helped kind of push him back up to the sphere of where he should be considered in hip hop. And I think they're like, as much as I want to say that I can enjoy the Confessions of Dangerous Minds, the Everybody's, like, as much as there's stuff I can enjoy in them, I can't regard them as like top tier albums at all. And it kind of was like a decline in Logic's reputation, and No Pressure really elevated it back to the point where he had kind of had two major like great albums, and didn't have that third one, which I mentioned at the start of this video, where it's like every artist needs to have those like 3 albums to be considered. Like Eminem has the Eminem Show, Slim Shady LP, and Marshall Mathers LP. Kendrick Lamar has To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City, and Damn. And Logic finally being able to have No Pressure really was a way of being able to like regain control, in a sense of being able to control his narrative, which then moving on, I would kind of say is a shame of what happened to Bobby Tarantino 3, because I'm going to rank it in B, because the songs on it aren't necessarily bad, but this is another thing of like, it feels like it's not a Bobby Tarantino album. It feels like kind of cheesy in some elements of it, but granted to it, it made sure that it had the couple of songs that made you go, alright, Logic hasn't lost it, he's still got some like really good things within here. Those main 2 songs being Inside and Theme for the People, and also I guess See You Space Cowboy. But like, I don't think it was the project people wanted to hear after a No Pressure. I think people were hoping it would be kind of more of a classic, and I think that's what I could probably say that I was hoping for. However, I think it's important to remember the context of the situation Logic was in, which is his deal with Def Jam, which somehow, I don't get how it would be this long of a contract, but either way, the situation Logic was in was he needed to drop 2 more projects to actually get out of his contract with Def Jam to fulfill it and complete it, so then he could be independent. And I think he's even come out and said that Bobby Tarantino 3 was kind of like a 3-day experiment, kind of just like going back to his home and literally just making beats, writing raps, and just kind of having fun with making music. And I can definitely see that, because Bobby Tarantino 3 doesn't come across as like a cohesive project. Like, each song sounds like it could just be a random playlist essentially of just unreleased Logic songs. So for that regard, I feel like this is kind of one of those things of, if you wanted extra Logic content whilst he was working on the real shit, you had it there in Bobby Tarantino 3. And now we move on to his penultimate project for now, which is Vinyl Days. And for me, this is definitely going in middle of A tier. Now, Vinyl Days, this is where you can tell Logic is just having fun, and he is like, this is a hip hop album. If you've ever seen a proper hip hop album, this is it. And I feel like this is exactly that thing of like, this is what's going to bring Logic back into kind of like being ranked highly within the general hip hop community. Whenever I listen to Vinyl Days, I'm listening to the whole thing because I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. In my opinion, this is Logic's love letter to hip hop. And that leaves us with Logic's latest release, and that is College Park. And for me, I'm actually going to say this is top of A tier. So, actually not top, Under Pressure's still above it in my opinion, but I feel like carrying on with that theme of what Vinyl Days was, as I kind of just said, like, it's a just rap album. This is where, like, even in terms of like, even if you look at the like color of both album covers, like, there's definitely a theme that carries through from Vinyl Days into College Park. And I think that element of what Vinyl Days was doing with just having like pure ability of rap and a kind of lack of just songs, I feel like this is where College Park takes what Vinyl Days was doing but kind of implements all that rap skill into a few more songs rather than just rap songs, if that makes sense. So personally, I do rank it over Vinyl Days because of that side of like, I could take a couple of songs from College Park and just really enjoy listening to it. And I've got a little bit of a list here which goes from, now I don't know what it is, but somehow like there's this tradition, just not even within Logic, just within like music in general, where track 3 tends to always be the best. And track 3 on here, Lightsabers, I absolutely love. I think it's a great song. I love how it's kind of got the 2 different songs with the beat switch sort of thing. I love how it works in there. I love C. Castro's actual verse in it. I think it's great. Inspo, Gatensburg Freestyle, Self-Medication, Shimmy I really like. Paradise 2 I think is quite good as well. I actually do quite like Calm Down as well. And then AO's quite a vibey song. But it's something interesting I find, which is like, I actually was considering putting, like I was trying to think, do I prefer Vinyl Days or do I prefer College Park? And I think it just depends on my mood, because right now it is College Park's just above it. But I think what College Park can be a bit tricky with is that kind of it almost does the thing that everybody did in terms of the skits, where they kind of overstay their welcome a little bit, and kind of like, if like, I do find it a bit annoying, like say the Lightsaber song, like there's a skit at the end of it, and I kind of just wish when I have it in my playlist that skit wasn't there, because then I have to either manually skip it myself or I just have to deal with it and listen to it, especially if I'm driving. And I would say they actually work quite well in terms of the story that they're trying to tell. Logic in 2011 try and like make a name for himself, go into a show with his crew. I like that as a story and as a concept for the album, but unfortunately I think it does overplay itself a little bit. But the songs are so good that I think it's like worthy enough to stick it in the place that I put it. And that, everybody, has been my tier list of all of Logic's albums. I love this dude. I really am looking forward to more music from him. And he's just someone I think you guys need to keep your eyes out on, because he's genuinely a really like great guy just in general, how he comes across online. And when he's on his grind making music and he is properly in love with the process, the projects that come out of that are amazing and genuinely worth listening to. So people need to stop sleeping so much on Logic and go and listen to some of his stuff, alright? But those have been my thoughts on Logic's albums. So let me know how, 1, you would rank Logic's albums, and also 2, how you would rank my tier list of his albums. So yeah, I've been Ollie Rodriguez Stallman. Leave a like, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video. Later.